Okay, check this out, you guys. Today, we'll be making potato chips. Not just any potato chips, seriously crunchy, delicious potato chips. I'll show you how to make these at home, but first, I need to know, what type are you? First, there's the classic kind. Super thin, light in both color and texture, with a gentle crisp. And then there is the kettle chip, deeply colored and flavored, quite a bit thicker with a heavy, shattering crunch. Personally, I am a man of thickness. I like a good kettle chip, but honestly, no matter what your preference is, even an average potato chip is pretty good. And a great one, like a homemade one, is what crunchy snack dreams are made of. Before I show you how to make the best potato chips ever though, there's something I need to show you. So if you go on Google Maps and then you type in 793 Malta Avenue in Ballston Spa, New York, USA, it's gonna take you to this random looking place in upstate New York. I know it looks like nothing, but hold on a second. If we drag the street view guy right here, and then we just take a look around until there. Okay, do you see the sign? I know you can't read it right now, but let me pull up a high-res version of that. Crumb's Place. George Crumb Speck, chef, inventor of the potato chip, ran his restaurant here. Inventor of the potato chip? Really? Look, you may not have heard of George Speck's name before, but you might have heard the legend of the potato chip. Before opening his own place, George Speck, who was known as Crumb, was working as a chef in this other restaurant called Moon's Lake House, just a few miles away. One day, a picky customer, sometimes said to be business magnate Cornelius Vanderbilt, ordered fried potatoes, but complained that they were too thick and sent them back. Crumb thought, okay, fair enough, and made him a new batch. But Vanderbilt still thought they were too thick and sent them back again. But this time, Crumb got pretty mad. So to teach the customer a lesson, he cut potato slices so thin you could see through them and fried them until they turned completely crisp. And you can probably guess what happened next. Instead of hating them, Vanderbilt actually loved them, and they became a famous signature order in this restaurant, with people even buying them in paper cones for picnics or just as snacks. Except, unfortunately, this is another one of these amazing food origin stories that simply don't check out. Look, George Speck was a chef and he was famous for his amazing potato chips, but the part about him being the first one ever to do it... According to a study by the American Folklore Society, the story only starts showing up a good 50 years after it supposedly happened. And that most likely makes it a marketing stunt promoted by the restaurant George Speck used to work at that actually did sell so-called Saratoga chips for quite a while. The designs are still around, and in fact, believe it or not, the brand is actually still around, even though it doesn't seem to be super active at the moment. But look, even if the exchange between George Speck and Vanderbilt really happened, there's another problem, which is that a recipe for potatoes fried in slices or shavings appears in a British cookbook from 1822, which is 2 years before George Speck was even born. And honestly, it's such a simple recipe that I find it pretty hard to believe that only one person ever came up with this. What we do know for sure is that as early as 1910, companies like Mike Sells from Ohio started making chips industrially, and in the 1920s, Smith's Potato Crisps company from the UK started adding salt. And it wasn't until the 1950s that the Irish brand Tato started making flavored chips like cheese and onion. Old school potato chips were all made in the kettle style, meaning you cook individual batches in a big pot of hot oil. But sometime in the mid-20th century, potato chip companies figured out that you could actually make a whole lot more potato chips in the same time by using a continuous process, meaning frying and drying on conveyor belts. The side effect of this process was that chips got a lot thinner and paler, which actually customers preferred for the longest time. And it was only in the late 1980s that a few kind of boutique companies in the United States revived that old school kettle style that by that time had almost disappeared entirely. And sometimes since the 2000s, with a renewed customer interest in, handmade things and the rise of hipster culture, kettle style chips became the fastest growing segment in the industry, and I believe they still are today. Probably driven by my consumption of them. But yeah, they might be facing some hard times because now I have figured out how to make them myself, which I'm about to share with you. And you'd think, oh, it's so easy, right? You just slice up some potatoes, throw them in hot oil, and that's it, right? Not that simple. Let me explain. So first of all, we need to understand the science of potato chips. Okay, I thought this was gonna look cool, but I don't think so. Now, fortunately, over at SeriousEats.com, Kenji Lopez-Alt has done most of the hard work for us, so let me recap that for you. This is an uncooked potato chip. It's mostly filled with water, starches, and sugars. At this stage, of course, it's wet and elastic. Now, when you drop it in hot oil, here's what happens. The water inside the chip heats up and eventually starts evaporating as it passes 100 degrees Celsius. When you see food bubbling as it fries, that's water evaporating. Oil itself does not even boil at these temperatures. Okay, so when every last bit of free water has evaporated, it will leave these little empty bubbles inside the chip, which will eventually fill up with the oil surrounding it. At the same time, we cooked the starches and dehydrated them, leaving us with a hardened, starchy, crystalline structure with a little bit of rich fat trapped inside. Now remember, oil might be liquid, but it's not technically wet, and that is what gives us a dry and crisp potato chip. And here's where the real challenge is. We have to dehydrate the inside of the chip before the outer layer starts to burn. Because if there's even a little bit of free water left in the chip, it's gonna get soggy. And because first the sugars and eventually the starches in the potato will begin to do just that, to burn and taste bitter, that is a real issue. So here's what you need to do to set yourself up for success. First, choose the right potato. The potato chip industry actually uses special varieties that are extremely high in starch and very, very low in sugar. And if you want perfect results, that really is the only way to go. But you can't just buy those at the supermarket. But what you can buy at the supermarket is a good old simple starchy potato. In Germany, we call them mealy potatoes. In the United States, there would be a variety like Russet or something. But just wherever you are in the world, find out what type of potato is recommended for making mashed potatoes. And that's the style that's gonna work for making potato chips. The next thing we need to take care of is slicing our potatoes very, very thin. In my experience, anything between 0.5 millimeter and maybe up to 2 millimeters tops will work, and I personally do prefer slightly thicker chips, and that actually makes it a bit easier. In theory, you could try doing this with a knife, but you will need some serious Wangang level knife skills that I certainly don't have, so the most low-tech solution is using a simple peeler. Just peel the skin off first and then just keep shaving and do your best getting even slices. The result will be far from perfect, but it will still work and you won't have to buy any expensive tools. So that's that. The better option is certainly a mandolin slicer. Cut the spuds in half to get an even area to start with, and then go at it carefully and evenly until you get a beautiful stack of chips like these. So this is definitely a step up, but at least on my mandolin it kind of still makes some slices uneven or simply way thicker than what it's set to. So honestly, and I'm sorry for that, the supreme solution is an electric slicer like this one, which makes its second appearance in a row on this channel. What an unexpectedly good investment. So it gives me the most even slices that I as an imperfect human can produce, even though it still might give you an odd one here and there. This is why no matter how you shave your chips, be sure to check if there are any super uneven ones, and do not use them unless you want to ruin your entire batch. So these raw potato slices, they already look pretty good, right? And you could technically just toss them in hot oil and fry them as they are. In fact, that's exactly how kettle chips are made. But there's one thing. This is kind of what they will come out as. This is from a test batch I did earlier. Let's give those a taste real quick. Oh. Okay, these potato chips taste seriously amazing. Like the deepest roast potato flavor ever. Not too greasy and seasoned with just a little bit of salt. But I think the issue here is actually quite obvious. They are extremely brown. Not burnt, I promise. They don't taste burnt at all, but they are very brown. Like even a little bit more than the regular kettle chips you might already be familiar with. And to be honest, I love that, I really do. But in his Serious Eats article, what Kenji points out is that he is actually going for the exact opposite. He wants that supermarket style light blonde potato chip. In his method, you first rinse the potato chips very, very well until the water runs clear. Then parboil them in vinegar spiked water for around 4 minutes. After that, you drain them and pat them dry on a kitchen towel. Then fry in small batches, aiming for an oil temp of about 160 degrees Celsius. Once the chips begin to turn golden and the bubbling has almost fully stopped, you know the water is about to cook out, and that's when you want to get the chips out onto a paper towel and salt right away. So both the rinsing as well as the parboiling actually achieve the same thing. We get rid of some excess sugar and starches. Less sugar means less burning. And in case you were wondering, that extra spike of vinegar actually further slows down the breakdown of the sugars that are left. The result is a chip that has just a little bit more time in the hot oil before it starts turning brown, and that extra minute or two, believe it or not, it makes a huge difference. It's literally the difference between having or not having a little window of time in which we achieve full dehydration without heavy browning. So this is what they come out as, and you can see they are pretty beautiful. They are a nice, just slightly golden brown color, but much closer to what you'd get in a supermarket, right? Unfortunately though, there's always a price to pay, am I right? So here's the thing, they do still taste great, much better than anything you can get at the store in my opinion still. However, by washing away so much of the components of a potato, it's just logical that flavor is going to decrease. And that really shouldn't surprise anyone. And so in comparison to this one, this is the darker batch that we cooked straight away, night and day difference. This is ridiculous. The blonde one is just not as ridiculously intense and potato flavored as this one. I mean, it definitely tastes cleaner for sure. I believe it looks a little bit prettier, but then my question is it worth going through all that trouble of making potato chips at home when you're actually going for something that tastes exactly like the supermarket stuff, while you could actually have something that tastes better than the supermarket stuff, while admittedly looking a bit more rustic? I don't know, I like rustic. What's wrong with rustic? So my suggestion would be to go for a middle ground. After slicing your potatoes, do rinse off the surface starch. I think that's easy enough to do, and it's actually gonna help a little bit. But then let's skip the blanching. I think we lose too much flavor that way, and also it's one extra step we can omit, and everybody likes having less work. Speaking of which, there's one more dramatic shortcut I would like to propose. Pretty much all the recipes you find online tell you to fry the chips in hot oil and to do so in small batches. But I'm wondering, why? I think most people are afraid that if you add too many chips at the same time, one, they're gonna stick together somehow, and two, the oil temperature is gonna drop quite rapidly and we're gonna fry them in low temperature oil, which is gonna make them really greasy and soggy, right? We all know that's what happens, right? No, to both. First, let me point out that studies have confirmed frying food in lower temperature oil actually makes them absorb less fat, not more. What higher temperatures really do is they give you a better crisp, and that's because as the water inside the food you're frying boils at a high temperature, it does so more vigorously and it leaves bigger cavities inside the food as it escapes, and then that kind of creates the sensation of a more intense crunch, and that tricks our minds into believing that something is less greasy, while in fact the opposite is true. There's actually this one French fry making recipe or method out there, sometimes credited to French chef Joël Robuchon, and that makes use of this exact scientific discovery. You get some raw potatoes, you cut those up into fries, and you drop them straight into cold oil and slowly let those come up to heat. The method is admittedly quite a bit slower, but it's so much simpler than the traditional multi-step process of pre-blanching, frying, double frying. If you've ever made French fries, you know what I'm talking about. So Robuchon's cold oil method, I've tried it before. You get good fries, not the best fries. They're a little bit less crispy than I like them, but compared to how simple it is, it's definitely an option to keep in mind for home cooking. So what if we tried that method with potato chips? First, fill up a wok or kettle with about a liter of oil, and then one by one drop in your rinsed and dried but raw potato slices, about 2 to 3 very big potatoes worth of chips. And I know this looks like quite a lot, but just trust me on this one. Now set the stove to medium high and just let those slowly come up to heat, giving everything only a few very gentle stirs here and there. Trust the process and leave the potatoes alone for most of the time. And don't actually worry too much about stickage. As the water starts evaporating from the potato slices, it actually helps creating a natural gap between the chips. Now, while the big advantage here is that you can make one really big batch in one go with this method, it will definitely take a while. The chips, the water in there, it actually keeps pulling down the oil temperature. You might have to wait 30 or even 40 minutes until the chips are fully dehydrated. A few of the chips will get there a bit earlier and start turning brown before the others. That's almost impossible to avoid unless you somehow manage to get them all perfectly even. So as that happens, just gently stir the chips in the oil, fishing out the fully cooked ones with chopsticks and transferring them to a paper towel lined bowl. Towards the end, you can get all the leftover chips out with a spider, pop them into the bowl, toss with salt, and there you have it. Wonderful, fresh, kettle style potato chips. So this really is a super effective method. If you ask me, the most reasonable one to make potato chips at home, and they will actually taste a lot better than what you get at the supermarket. Oh, and by the way, I know a lot of you are actually a little bit hesitant to deep fry at home because so much oil is usually involved and you don't want to waste it, but good news is making potato chips actually leaves the oil really clean, so you just have to let that cool down and you can reuse it. But yeah, with that being said, let's try those potato chips, shall we? No, I'm about to break my teeth here. I don't think I need to say much, do I? I mean, it's one ingredient, a potato, and you can taste all of it. I need to stop. I spent the last week deep frying, and that is a good payoff. I know potato chips are so cheap to buy, but it's really worth making these at least once just to see what it's like, what the difference is like, and how much a potato can actually taste of potato. The thing that's currently saving me from death by potato chips, from eating all of those in one sitting, is the fact that they're just salted chips. And you know, the stuff that really makes me addicted is kind of like the flavored ones, cheese and onion, or salt and vinegar. Those are my favorites, but please do let me know what your favorites are and if you would like to see kind of a follow-up on this one, because now we know the method, but how do we get flavor into the chips? Because we can only use dry powders. Anything that's not dry is gonna make them soggy. So that's a bit of a fun challenge. Let me know if you want to see that, and I hope you learned something. I learned a lot making this episode, and I'm gonna see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.